Chapter 1. The Question. The first alien to discover chosen parenthood did so at a dinner table. Inspector Leth Var had visited battlefields, treaty halls, and planetary courts. He had investigated trade abuses between species that communicated through scent and reviewed custody treaties for civilizations that considered eye contact a threat. Nothing had prepared him for a suburban kitchen. The dinner was informal by human standards, too informal in Leth's opinion. The plates did not match. One child ate only the yellow vegetables and pushed the green ones into a careful pile. Another spoke without being invited and asked whether assembly inspectors carried weapons beneath formal clothing. Leth answered truthfully, "Sometimes." The youngest child looked delighted. Across the table, the two human adults exchanged the sort of expression that communicated an entire conversation without words. Leth had seen humans do that before. What he had not seen was the genetic mismatch. The father had dark skin, black hair, and broad shoulders. The mother had pale skin, copper hair, and gray eyes. The eldest child resembled neither of them. She had gold-brown eyes and features suggesting ancestry from a region thousands of kilometers away. The youngest child clearly resembled the father. The middle child shared enough with the mother that biological relation seemed likely. But the eldest child carried no obvious inheritance from either adult. Leth noticed throughout dinner. Human families often combined lineages. He knew that. Their reproductive customs were unusually flexible by galactic standards. Still, the discrepancy bothered him. When the meal ended and the children disappeared into the living room to argue over a game, Leth finally asked, "Which adult produced the older child?" The mother blinked, "Produced." "Biologically." "Oh." She glanced toward her husband. "Neither of us." Leth waited. The father began gathering plates. "She was adopted." Leth's translator hesitated. The word had no clean equivalent in his language. It offered several possibilities: acquired, transferred, legally claimed. None sounded correct. "Temporarily?" Leth asked. The mother frowned. "No." "She will eventually return to her original household." "No." "Then what is her status here?" The father looked toward the living room. The eldest girl was accusing one of the younger children of cheating. The younger child was denying it with enough enthusiasm to suggest guilt. The father smiled faintly. "She's our daughter." Leth assumed the translator had malfunctioned. "You are not genetically related." "No." "You did not produce her." "No." "Then how can she be your daughter?" The mother considered the question, not because she did not know the answer, because she had apparently never needed to explain it. She needed parents. Leth waited. There had to be more: a legal designation, a genetic exception, a ceremonial bond, some cultural mechanism that transformed unrelated individuals into kin. There was no more. The father shrugged. "So we became them." Leth looked toward the living room again. A moment later, the girl called toward the kitchen, "Dad." The man turned immediately. "Yeah." "Can you help me?" He put down the plate. "Coming." No hesitation, no clarification of status, no distinction, father, daughter, as though biology were only one possible beginning. Leth thought about that for the rest of the evening. He thought about it on the transport back to the assembly residence. He thought about it when he opened the cultural brief on human family law: adoption, guardianship, kinship care. Foster care, reunification, permanency. The terms multiplied until the translator began offering explanatory notes instead of equivalents. Leth had initially believed he had discovered an unusual human custom. He was wrong. Humanity had built law, courts, training, oversight, and entire public institutions around something most civilizations treated only as an emergency exception. Sometimes the adults responsible for a child were not the adults who created them. Years later, one sentence from that dinner would enter the human archive. "So we became them." It was not the moment the galaxy learned that unrelated beings could care for a child. That had happened everywhere, in isolated cases, for thousands of years. It was the moment the galaxy realized humanity had built a system around the possibility. Chapter 2. The Galactic Solution. Every civilization had children who lost parents. War killed parents. Disease killed parents. Accidents killed parents. Some parents disappeared, some became dangerous, some became unable to provide care. The galaxy had never ignored those children. It had built systems. The Nethari raised them in state academies. The Var Compact assigned them to occupational guilds where education and eventual employment were guaranteed. The Pelosians placed them in communal residential houses supervised by rotating professional caretakers. The Carol clans returned them to the nearest verified bloodline, regardless of distance. The Talorians placed them under direct government stewardship until adulthood. Those systems worked. Children were fed, educated, protected, tracked. No civilization described the arrangements as abandonment. No administrator believed the children were being treated cruelly. The galaxy had solved the survival problem. Humanity asked another question: who would still be there when the shift ended? That question bothered Leth more than the language of love ever would have. Love was subjective, permanence could be measured. Human Representative Mara Sato explained the distinction during the first assembly hearings. Foster care is not adoption, she said. Several delegates looked relieved. Then she continued. Sometimes foster care ends in reunification with a parent. Sometimes a relative assumes permanent care. Sometimes guardianship is appropriate. Sometimes adoption becomes necessary. Sometimes an older child reaches adulthood without any of those outcomes and still needs permanent relationships. Counselor Vor frowned. Then what defines the system? Responsibility. For how long? As long as needed. That is imprecise. Children are imprecise. The chamber did not appreciate the answer. Leth did, a little. Human diplomats explained that foster care was not simply compassion. It was law, screening, training, casework, temporary placement. Court review, reunification when safe, termination of parental rights when necessary, permanent guardianship, adoption, support payments, home inspections, medical authority, education plans. The Assembly's legal scholars were fascinated. Its cultural scholars were appalled. You permit strangers to assume parental responsibility? One delegate asked. Yes, Sato replied. Without genetic obligation. Yes. Why would they voluntarily accept such a burden? Because the child needs someone to. The delegate stared. That is not an answer. Sato's expression did not change. It is the whole answer. The Assembly commissioned a study. Human history contained millions of examples. Infants raised by relatives, children taken in by neighbors, war orphans adopted across borders, grandparents becoming parents again, older siblings assuming guardianship, single adults fostering teenagers, couples welcoming children with complex medical needs. But the study also contained failures. Placements broke down. Adults neglected children. Some abused the trust given to them. Agencies ignored warnings. Courts made mistakes. Children moved too many times. Leth expected the humans to minimize those records. Instead, they submitted them themselves. Then they submitted the reforms that followed: revised laws, new training, stricter oversight, new failures, new corrections. Humanity did not present foster care as proof that humans were uniquely compassionate. They presented it as dangerous work, involving vulnerable children and fallible adults. That made it harder to dismiss. Chapter 3. The Tour. The Assembly sent observers to Earth. Leth volunteered. He told himself professional curiosity was the reason. Naomi Brooks did not believe him. She was a human social worker from Washington State who had spent 26 years working with children and families. The delegation expected emotional propaganda. Naomi showed them paperwork, background checks, home studies, medical histories, court hearings, school reports, therapeutic assessments, emergency placement plans, financial records, safety inspections. Leth looked down at the stack. This appears bureaucratic. It is. I was told the system was based on compassion. It is. These documents are not compassionate. Naomi smiled faintly. They keep compassion from becoming impulse. She explained, a child could not simply be handed to an adult who felt moved by their suffering. A home had to be safe. The caregiver had to understand trauma. Income mattered, but wealth was not required. Space mattered, but perfection was not required. Stability mattered, patience mattered. The state investigated, courts reviewed, social workers visited, children received advocates. The system assumes adults can fail, Leth said. Yes. That seems insulting. It is also true. The delegation visited a foster home outside Seattle. The house was noisy. Shoes crowded the entrance. A schedule covered half the refrigerator. Medication times were highlighted in 3 colors. 4 children lived there. Only one was biologically related to either adult. One was a temporary placement while his mother completed treatment. One had lived there for 3 years and would probably be adopted. Another was a teenager who refused to discuss permanence at all. During the visit, one child knocked over a lamp. The lamp shattered. The boy immediately began crying, not because he was injured, because he expected to be sent away. The foster father knelt beside him. No one is sending you anywhere because of a lamp. The boy shook his head. You are. No. I broke it. I know. You're mad. I'm not thrilled. The boy stopped crying long enough to look confused. The father pointed toward the broken pieces. But lamps are replaceable. The boy did not believe him. No one is sending you anywhere because of a lamp. He repeated it, then repeated it again. Leth watched. The lamp was inexpensive. The reassurance was not. Later, he asked Naomi why the boy had expected removal. Previous placements ended. For misconduct. For being difficult. Was he difficult? Yes. Leth looked through the window. The foster father and the boy were sweeping glass into a dustpan together. Then why keep him? Naomi looked at Leth as though the answer should have been obvious. Because difficult children are still children. Leth wrote the sentence into his field report. He did not yet understand it, but for the first time he suspected understanding might matter. Chapter 4. The Institution. Several months later, Naomi was invited to inspect one of the finest Talorian child residencies in the galaxy. Leth arranged to accompany her. The building was immaculate. Every child had a bed. Every room was climate-controlled. Meals met exact nutritional standards. Education occurred on schedule. Caregivers were professionally certified. Medical needs were tracked precisely. The children wore clean uniforms. They moved quietly. The Talorian director was proud. No child here experiences hunger, violence, or uncertainty. Naomi walked through the sleeping wing. How many caregivers remain assigned to the same child for more than 1 year? The director checked his display. None. Naomi stopped. None. Rotation prevents unhealthy attachment. Leth looked at him. The phrase struck differently now. Naomi asked, a child should not become attached to a caregiver. Not to one who will eventually leave. So you make sure everyone leaves early. Yes. The director expected approval. Naomi looked into a room containing 8 beds, the same blanket on each, the same storage unit, the same small light, no photographs, no drawings, no possessions that could not fit into one container. Who comes when they have nightmares? She asked. The night supervisor. Who knows what each child is afraid of? That information is available in their file. Who celebrates their birthday? The residency conducts annual recognition. Naomi was quiet, then. Who misses them when they're gone? The director did not understand the question. Leth did not fully, but enough to feel something tighten in his chest. The residency kept children alive. It kept them clean. It kept them safe. Their needs were cataloged, their progress measured, their futures planned. No one belonged specifically to them. When Naomi left the building, she cried beside the transport. The facility met every standard, Leth said. I know. No children were mistreated. I know. Then what is missing? Naomi looked back at the perfect building. Permanence. Leth waited. She wiped her face. Someone who stays long enough to know the file is wrong. That stayed with him. Chapter 5. The Breaking of Varda. The disaster that changed the debate began on Varda. Varda was a frontier colony with 3 cities and no military significance. 8 species lived there. Its largest export was ceramic superconductors. Its largest public celebration was a river festival held every spring. At 04:16 local time, Varda's star released a magnetic eruption far beyond any forecast. Orbital systems failed. Power grids collapsed. Communications vanished. The old reactors beneath the northern plateau shut down safely. The emergency cooling network did not. By the time rescue ships arrived, the northern city had burned. The southern city survived. The central city suffered structural collapse across nearly half its residential district. 312,000 people died. 31,000 children survived without a living parent or verified guardian. Leth arrived with the Second Assembly relief delegation. For 3 days, he helped process emergency custody records, names, ages, species. Known relatives. Missing relatives, medical needs. Language, siblings, some files were complete, others contained only a child and a temporary identification number. The Central Assembly responded quickly, medical fleets arrived, food followed, emergency habitats unfolded across the plains. 7 civilizations proposed long-term residential academies. The Talorians offered to construct facilities within 6 months. The Var Compact offered vocational placement at adolescence. The Nethari offered education and citizenship. All were generous, all were familiar. Humanity proposed emergency foster placement, temporary homes first, reunification with surviving parents or relatives when possible, longer placement when necessary, adoption only where no safe family connection could be restored. Leth read the proposal twice. It was the first time the difference between foster care and adoption stopped feeling semantic. Representative Mara Sato addressed the assembly. Minister Tessa Vaughn spoke first. You intend to place 31,000 children into private households? Yes. Across multiple worlds? Yes. To adults unrelated to them? Yes. For how long? As long as necessary. This is not emergency housing. No. You expect strangers to become family. Sato shook her head, not automatically. The chamber quieted. We expect them to become responsible for a child. Family may come later, reunification may come instead. Leth looked toward the rows of emergency files. 31,000 children. 31,000 separate futures. The debate lasted 9 hours. The children still needed somewhere to sleep. That settled the question faster than philosophy did. Chapter 6. The applications. Humanity answered Varda with forms. The first day brought 80,000 applications. By the end of the week, there were 6 million families, single adults, retired couples, grandparents, veterans, teachers, doctors, mechanics, farmers, people prepared for infants, people who preferred teenagers, people trained in complex medical care, people willing to keep sibling groups together. The galaxy assumed the numbers reflected temporary humanitarian enthusiasm. Then human agencies rejected most applicants. Leth confronted Naomi over it. You have far more volunteers than children. Yes. Then why reject them? Because wanting to help doesn't automatically make someone safe. Background checks eliminated some. Home studies eliminated others. Training caused many to withdraw. Some wanted gratitude. Some wanted obedience. Some expected rescued children to arrive loving, thankful, and easy. Human trainers told them about nightmares, food hoarding, regression, silence, rage. Children who destroyed gifts because they expected those gifts to disappear. Children who lied, children who refused to unpack, children who tested every rule because they needed to know whether the adults would leave. The number of approved homes fell dramatically. It remained enormous. Leth toured one of the staging centers. He expected dormitories. Instead, he saw photographs sent by prospective families. Rooms, not institutions. Rooms, beds chosen for specific species. Storage spaces deliberately left empty. Translation devices, cultural materials, food from Varda, medical equipment, photographs of the colony printed from surviving archives. Humans were not preparing places where Vardan children would forget what had happened. They were preparing places where remembering would be allowed. Near the end of the tour, Naomi stopped beside one file. ELANTHI female. Age 6. Name Niri. Parents confirmed deceased. Sibling KES 13, status unknown. A photograph showed a small child holding a strip of blue fabric in both hands. Leth looked at Naomi. Has she spoken? Not for 11 days. What happens to her? Naomi closed the file. We find out what she needs. Chapter 7. Niri. Niri belonged to a species called the Elanthi, whose children developed slowly and depended heavily on stable social groups. Her parents had died in Varda's northern city. Her older brother was missing. She spoke to no one for 11 days. The medical staff described her as physically stable. The psychological report used the phrase non-responsive grief state. Naomi Brooks read the report, then sat beside her. Neri held a strip of blue fabric torn from her mother's festival coat. Naomi did not ask for it. She did not touch it. She did not begin with questions. She sat. The first day passed without a word, so did the second. On the third day, Neri spoke. Where do children go? Naomi knew what she meant. Different places. Do they stay? Some do. Do the adults stay? Naomi answered carefully, "The good ones do." Niri looked at her for the first time. The placement team eventually matched her with a human family on New Cascadia. Daniel and Mira Ortiz had one biological son and had fostered 3 children over 12 years. Their son, Tomas, was 17. Their home was quiet. They had requested a younger child and completed a lengthy cultural training before Niri ever knew their names. Leth attended the placement conference as the assembly observer assigned to Varda. By then, he understood enough to stay silent. Niri's first meeting with the Ortizes lasted 22 minutes. Daniel did not try to hug her. Mira brought tea, prepared the way Alanthe families served it. Tomas sat on the floor so he would not tower over her. Niri studied all 3, then she asked the question that mattered. "Will you keep me?" Daniel's expression changed. Mira answered, "We'll take care of you while the people deciding your future do their work." Niri did not like that answer. Neither did Leth. It was still the correct one. Humans had learned that frightened children deserved honesty more than promises adults could not yet guarantee. Chapter 8. The first night. Niri arrived at the Ortiz home with one bag. It contained 2 uniforms, medical supplies, a translator, and the strip of blue fabric. Her room had been prepared. The walls were undecorated. Mira explained that Niri could decide what belonged there. There were no family photographs because the Ortizes did not know whether seeing other families would comfort her or hurt. There was a small lamp, a low shelf, a temperature-regulating blanket suitable for Alanthe's skin. Niri inspected everything, then placed her bag beside the door. "You can unpack if you want," Daniel said. "No." "All right." He left it there. Niri slept in her clothes. At 02:14, she woke screaming. Daniel reached the doorway first. He stopped outside. "Can I come in?" Niri stared at him. Adults in the emergency residency entered without asking. Medical staff entered. Supervisors entered. No one asked children for permission to enter rooms assigned to them. Daniel waited. Eventually, Niri nodded. He came inside and sat on the floor. She did not want to be touched. He did not touch her. He stayed until morning. The next night, she woke again. Mira came. The third night, Tomas sat outside the doorway and read a children's story in Alanthe. His pronunciation was terrible. Niri endured 3 paragraphs. Then she corrected him. He pronounced the same word incorrectly again. She corrected him again. By the 5th correction, Niri laughed. It was the first time she had laughed since Varda. No one celebrated. The family had been warned not to turn every small response into an event the child then felt pressured to repeat. Tomas simply kept reading badly. On the 12th day, Niri moved her bag, not far, from beside the doorway to the low shelf. Daniel noticed. He said nothing. Chapter 9. The brother. Niri's older brother was found 7 weeks later. His name was Kes. He was 13. He had survived in an emergency shelter beneath a damaged university complex. When rescue crews opened it, the survivors had been living on emergency rations for nearly 2 months. The identification system connected Kes's record to Niri's case. Human policy gave sibling reunification priority. The Ortiz family was told Niri might leave. Daniel and Mira prepared her. "Kes is alive," Mira said. Niri did not move. Then the cup in her hand fell to the floor. The reunion occurred at a regional placement center. Kes entered the room first. He saw his sister, ran toward her. Niri stood frozen. Kes stopped before touching her. For one terrible second, neither moved. Then Niri reached for him. They held each other. For the next hour, they spoke without translators. The adults waited outside. Kes had been placed with another household because his age, injuries, and medical needs made immediate joint placement difficult. The agencies began planning. The easiest solution was a residential program where both siblings could live. The human team looked for another answer first. The Ortizes volunteered. Their home was not large enough under existing regulations. Daniel converted his office into a bedroom. Tomas surrendered part of his study space. Mira rearranged the household schedule. The home was re-inspected. Kes moved in. He hated it. He considered the arrangement temporary. He accused Daniel and Mira of collecting damaged children. Fused most human food. He slept on the floor outside Niri's room for the first week. He challenged every rule Daniel created. Daniel set boundaries anyway. Mira preserved as much Vardan and Alanthe culture as she could. Tomas argued with Kes about everything: food, music, household chores, a sports league neither of them had cared about until they disagreed over it. Kes waited for the placement to end. It did not. He waited for Daniel to become tired of him. Daniel did not. He waited for Mira to stop asking whether he wanted Vardan food brought home. She did not. He waited for Tomas to stop treating him like an irritating younger brother. Tomas became better at it. Eventually, waiting for the family to fail became harder than living inside it. Chapter 10. The Debate. Varda placements divided the Central Assembly. Supporters pointed toward school attendance, improved health outcomes, reduced behavioral distress, higher rates of sibling contact. Opponents pointed toward legal chaos, inheritance claims multiplied, citizenship laws conflicted, medical authority became complicated. Some surviving relatives appeared months later. A small number of parents declared dead were discovered alive. Some foster families wanted adoption. Others supported reunification. Humanity had not invented an easy solution. It had created a system willing to confront difficult cases one child at a time. To much of the galaxy, that looked inefficient. Councillor Vor addressed the assembly. A civilization cannot redefine family through emotional enthusiasm. Representative Sato answered, "We are not asking you to redefine yours. You create obligations without bloodline. Yes, you permit private citizens to assume parental authority. Under judicial supervision. You transfer inheritance. Sometimes, you alter family names. When appropriate, you permit a child to belong to people who did not create them." Sato was silent, then she shook her head. "No." Vor frowned. "You just said, we allow adults to belong to a child." The chamber quieted. Leth sat 3 rows behind her. Years earlier, he would have dismissed the phrase as rhetorical. Now he thought of a broken lamp, a blue strip of fabric, a boy sleeping outside his sister's room. The wording stayed with the assembly because it described something their existing systems had never measured. Parenthood was not only possession created by biology, it could also be responsibility accepted by choice. Chapter 11. The Failure. Not every Varda placement succeeded. A child named Oro was removed from a human foster home after investigators learned the adults had isolated him from his language and culture. Another family requested termination after a teenager became violent. A third placement collapsed when caregivers were discovered to have lied during screening. Critics seized on every case. Humanity did not hide them. Investigations followed. Licenses were revoked. Children were moved. Standards changed. Training expanded. Cultural support became mandatory for cross-species placement. Independent child advocates received more authority. The assembly expected humanity to defend foster care. Humans defended the children instead. Naomi Brooks testified. Leth was among those questioning her, not as an opponent, as an inspector who had learned that good intentions deserved scrutiny. "Foster care is not good because every foster home is good," Naomi said. Leth studied the failure reports. "Then why preserve the system?" "Because the alternative isn't perfection." "What is the alternative?" "A child growing up without anyone committed to staying." Leth looked down. "Some adults do not stay." "No." "Then the system makes promises it cannot guarantee." Naomi nodded. "Yes." Leth looked up. "Why make them?" Naomi took a long time to answer. "Because children still need someone to try." Leth did not write the sentence down immediately. He no longer needed to. Chapter 12. Choosing. 3 years after Varda, Niri's case reached permanency review. Her parents were confirmed dead. No surviving relative could assume care. Kes was nearly an adult. The Ortiz family petitioned to adopt both siblings. The court required Neri to understand what adoption meant. A child advocate explained it carefully. Daniel and Mira would become her legal parents. The placement would no longer be temporary. She would inherit from them. They would hold medical and educational authority. She could keep her Vardan name. She could maintain her culture. She could maintain contact with Varda. She could say no. Niri listened, then looked at Mira. "If I say yes, can you still send me away?" Mira's face changed. "No." "What if I break something?" "No." "What if I am angry?" "No." "What if I do something bad?" Mira moved closer. "We might be angry with you." Niri's eyes lowered. "We might give you consequences. We might argue. You might hate us for a while." Niri looked up again. "But you stay." "Yes." Niri was quiet. Then she asked the question she had carried since arriving on New Cascadia. "What if I don't become human?" Mira knelt in front of her. "We don't need you to become human." Niri looked toward Daniel. "What do I become?" Daniel answered without hesitation, "Our daughter." The judge approved the adoption. Kes refused, at first. He believed accepting the Ortiz family would betray the parents he had lost. Daniel and Mira did not argue. They did not pressure him. They told him he remained part of the family whether he took their name or not. 6 months later, Kes changed his mind. At his hearing, the judge asked why. Kes looked toward Niri. Then Daniel, Mira, Tomas, the people who had rearranged their lives before knowing whether he would ever love them back. They kept choosing us. That became the line the galaxy remembered. Chapter 13. The Return to Varda. The Vardan children did not disappear into human society. Years after the disaster, communities returned to rebuild. Human foster agencies organized cultural visits. Some critics called the trips unnecessary. The children already had homes. Humanity insisted that home did not require forgetting. Niri returned to Varda at 12. The river festival had resumed. Music carried over the rebuilt waterfront. Lanterns floated above the water. Children who had been infants during the disaster chased one another between food stalls. But the northern city had not been rebuilt. Its ruins remained beneath a field of memorial lights. Neri carried the strip of blue fabric, the same piece torn from her mother's festival coat. Mira walked beside her. Daniel, Tomas, and Kes remained a few steps back. Naomi Brooks had retired by then, but she joined the trip. At the memorial, Neri stood for a long time without speaking. Finally, she looked at Naomi. "Does loving them mean I love my first parents less?" "No." "Then why does it feel disloyal?" Naomi considered. "Because grief sometimes tells us love has to compete." "Does it?" "No." Niri looked toward Mira. "She's my mother." "Yes." "My first mother was my mother." "Yes." "How can both be true?" Naomi smiled sadly. "Humans have been asking that for thousands of years." "Did they solve it?" "No." Niri looked down at the blue fabric, then tied it around her wrist. Mira stood beside her. Niri did not choose between them. She did not need to. One family belonged to the life she had lost. The other belonged to the life still unfolding. Both were true. Chapter 14. The First Alien Foster Home. The Var Compact became the first non-human civilization to build a formal foster system modeled partly on the Varda response. Minister Tessa Vaughn introduced the law herself. The first placement involved a 9-year-old named Rel. His parents had died in a transport collision. 2 retired navigators agreed to foster him. The first month went badly. Rel refused to sleep. He stole food. He hid ration packets beneath his bed. He damaged an expensive navigation console. The foster parents requested assistance, not removal. A human trainer visited. "Why does he hide food?" she asked. "He has never been hungry," one navigator said. "Then maybe hunger isn't the point." The adults looked at the ration packets. "What happens when he keeps food?" "He knows where it is. And he controls it." Rel had lost everything without warning. Parents, home, routine, possessions, future. The foster parents placed a food box in his room. It belonged to him. They promised to refill it. Within 3 weeks, he stopped stealing. The Compact initially published the case as evidence of human behavioral insight. The human trainer objected. It wasn't insight. Minister Vaughn asked, then what was it? Someone asked what the behavior was doing for the child. The question became part of Var foster training. Chapter 15. The Child Who Said No. The galaxy preferred stories where children accepted new families. Reality was less cooperative. A Talorian teenager named Sava rejected 3 foster placements. She had lived in institutions since infancy. Private family life felt intrusive. Adults asked questions. They expected conversation. They noticed when she was absent. They worried. Sava found worry unbearable. Then she met Ruth Amani. Ruth had fostered teenagers for 20 years. At their first meeting, Sava folded her arms. "I will not call you mother." "Good, it isn't my name." "I will not stay." "All right. I do not want affection." "Understood." "You are supposed to convince me." Ruth leaned back. "Why?" "So I agree to live with you." "I'm offering a place to live. You decide the rest." Sava accepted mostly because refusal had become less satisfying. For 6 months, she barely spoke. Ruth provided food, transportation, rules, privacy. A light left on when Sava came home late. She did not demand gratitude, she simply noticed. At 17, Sava entered the kitchen. "Are you busy on the 22nd? Ruth looked up. "Your graduation." Sava froze. "I never told you the date." "It was on the school calendar." "You checked?" "Of course." "Why?" Ruth looked confused. "I already took the day off." Sava said nothing. The institutions she had grown up in had noticed things too. They recorded absences, logged meals, tracked grades. Ruth noticed because Sava mattered to her. That was different. Chapter 16. Permanence. The word that finally changed galactic policy was not love. It was permanence. Love could be dismissed as emotion. Permanence could be measured. How many times had a child moved? How many caregivers had left? Who remained after adulthood? Who answered emergency calls? Who attended graduations? Who provided somewhere to return years after a case file closed? Human researchers demonstrated something residential systems had never been designed to measure. Care did not necessarily end at legal adulthood. Families continued. Former foster children called old caregivers. Adopted adults returned home. Parents worried about grown children. The obligation changed. The relationship did not vanish. Leth reviewed those studies years after his first dinner on Earth. One sentence in his original report embarrassed him. Unrelated parental attachment appears to be a permanent legal fiction. He amended it. The law was not creating the relationship. It was recognizing a choice people kept making after the law no longer required it. Chapter 17. The Assembly Child. Niri Ortiz entered the Galactic Assembly at 32. She represented Vardan reconstruction communities and specialized in interspecies family law. By then, foster care existed in 14 civilizations. It remained controversial. During a budget hearing, one delegate proposed replacing many family placements with centralized residences. "They are more efficient," he argued. Niri listened. Residential care could serve more children with fewer adults. Education could be standardized. Medical support centralized, transport costs reduced. The proposal was logical. Niri stood. "I lived in a residence before I entered foster care." The chamber quieted. "I was fed." She paused. "I was educated." Another pause. "I was safe." The delegate inclined his head. "Then you understand its value." "I do." The response surprised him. "Then why oppose this?" Niri looked toward the gallery. Daniel and Mira sat together, older now. Tomas sat beside them. Kes was late and had sent 3 messages insisting the transport delay was not his fault. Niri smiled faintly, then looked back at the delegate. "Because safety was the beginning of what I needed." "What did the residents fail to provide?" Niri did not raise her voice. "Someone who would be hurt if I disappeared." The delegate had no answer. Niri continued. "I was not a resource allocation problem." Her hand rested against the assembly table. "I was a child." She looked toward the gallery again. "And eventually, I had people who stayed." The budget proposal failed. Chapter 18. The cost. Foster care was not easier than institutions. Often it was harder. It required social workers, courts, training, therapy, transportation, investigations, respite care, cultural support, help for birth families, help for foster families, help after adoption. Sometimes the correct outcome was reunification. Sometimes it was kinship care, sometimes guardianship, sometimes adoption. Sometimes an older teenager wanted none of those labels and still needed someone who would answer the phone 5 years later. The system failed when people treated placement as the destination. Placement was only a bridge. The destination depended on the child. What mattered was that no child had to cross alone. Chapter 19. The Human Archive. Inspector Leth Var revised his original report on human family systems 41 years after that first dinner. By then, his work was required reading in several assembly schools. He changed the opening paragraph. The original had described adoption as an anomalous human practice in which unrelated adults acquired parental status. The revision was shorter. I misunderstood what I was seeing. Humans did not invent caring for unrelated children. Every civilization had examples of that. What humanity did was more difficult. It built systems around the belief that a child who lost one family should not automatically lose the possibility of another. The Human Archive preserved thousands of documents from Varda. Court transcripts, training manuals, medical reports, failure investigations, reunification orders, guardianship orders, adoption orders, letters, photographs. The documents disagreed with one another. Some recorded success, others recorded harm. The human system was never perfect. Adults failed children, placements ended, agencies made mistakes, some reunifications should have happened sooner, some should not have happened at all, some adoptions healed one wound while creating another. Humans argued about all of it, then they kept trying, because the alternative was easier to describe than to accept. A child with no one committed to staying. The line quoted most often from the Varda records did not come from a politician, or a social worker, or an assembly inspector. It came from a 13-year-old boy explaining why he had finally agreed to join a family he had spent months expecting to lose. They kept choosing us. That was the part Leth had missed at the dinner table. Not biology, not paperwork, not even adoption, choosing, and continuing to choose after the difficult day, after the broken lamp, after the nightmare, after the argument, after the child said no, after reunification failed, after reunification succeeded, after the case closed. After adulthood, the galaxy had built academies, residencies, guilds, programs, systems designed to answer a practical question. What should we do with children whose parents cannot care for them? Humanity built those systems too. Then it added another question, a quieter one. The question Niri had asked before she understood courts or permanency hearings. The question Kes had spent months pretending he did not care about. The question Sava never asked Ruth aloud. Who will still be here? Sometimes the answer was a birth parent who recovered. Sometimes a grandparent, a sibling, a guardian, an adoptive family, a foster parent whose legal responsibility had ended years before. There was no single human answer, only the promise to keep looking until the child had won. And beneath all the laws, all the forms, all the inspections and hearings, there remained the simplest version of the question, who wants me? The answer was never guaranteed. That was why humans kept building systems around the people willing to say it. We do. If you enjoyed this story, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What was your favorite moment? What would you have done in their place? Leave a comment below. I read everyone. If you'd like to help the channel grow, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story from the human archive. Thanks for listening.